Hi guys, Luetin here, and today I'm going to be talking about Battlefield 1. Now, I know you guys have been probably waiting for this because I haven't said tons and tons about the game. It's because, just amongst so many things, as you guys know, over time, my feelings towards Battlefield have changed quite a lot, and I was quite pleased that I didn't have the kind of hype train. I didn't feel like I had to get back from work and just get straight into the game. I didn't feel that kind of burn. So yeah, it's been nice to kind of come at it from a different perspective and sort of, kind of just lead myself into it, not feel kind of crushed. And again, being very aware of those first week sort of hype feelings that you always get when you start playing a new game. But today also, I'm joined by OP.Drewski, who I'm sure many of you know. Hi, Drew.
Hey guys.
And Drew's going to be working with me maybe a little bit more. Do you think we're going to be working a little bit more? Might be doing some bits and pieces. Yeah, exactly. And so we thought it'd be good to kind of start off with a bit of a dual discuss actually about impressions. And Drew's actually put up some of his own thoughts already. But it was good to come back and play some more. And do you think, Drew, like your opinions about some things have changed a little since you maybe initially first got into the game?
Especially getting into like the actual full game rather than just the beta and also the early access like 10-hour session. It's definitely been able to get a little bit more exposure in the game and get my opinion on it a little bit more refined.
Yeah, and I think that's been the way for quite a lot of people, is that when you actually come to the full game, that's quite a different experience than playing the beta, and it's especially when a certain map is chosen, you get a very strong feeling about that. But then when you look at how the game plays within the context of other maps, and you start to be like, okay, now I can see how some of these things are working a little bit more. But so I guess, look, where do you start when you're trying to look at a game? I guess overall a good place to start for anything PC or just a game in general is its performance, before you get into the details of kind of, how does it look, how are the maps, how do the guns work and stuff. Overall, I found the performance to be pretty stable. You get like well over sort of between 60 to 100 frames most of the time I'm finding when I've been running it and I was testing it. I haven't found that I was getting... Obviously, in the beta, we did have some of those horrific kind of lag spike moments where you would just kind of lock your screen just when you were trying to obviously take out maybe 2 or 3 people. Have you found you had any of those moments or not so much? I had one only, but...
Remember that crash I had yesterday? I did have one crash so far that was absolutely like random, and it just crashed the game. It crashed nothing else. But other than that, I think my performance has been pretty good. I think the beta definitely had some problems, but the full game, other than the one crash that I had in like probably, I don't know how many hours I've played, 18 hours I think, of the 10-hour session and the final game, I've only had that one crash, but performance on my side has been pretty good. I play with the 1080, so my performance is really good. I am going to be testing on the 750 Ti. I like doing tests on that graphics card because that's like, around the average consumer's graphics card that's going to be playing games on PC. Yeah. And so I'm definitely going to be doing some tests on that as well, and see how it runs, see what settings you can run it at to run it at like 60. But yeah, I feel like the performance is going to be rather good. I feel like DICE games are always good about scaling, especially resolution scaling into something like PC, because they do a lot of work on consoles, and the game has to run 60 FPS on consoles, but they usually do have to lower the resolution. I wonder if the resolution on consoles is lowered, but probably 900p or 720 or something.
Well, I'll have to see. I mean, people usually give good feedback to me about that, because I still have quite a few people who follow me who are console players, and people I know who are console players, and they usually do come back and give specific feedback about that. I think an interesting thing to remember as well with this is that, as you're saying, in terms of scaling and just, releasing a title across multiple platforms, with Battlefield 4, when that came out, of course, we remember that there was a ton of problems. Now, I went to an event in London when Battlefield 4 was coming out, and I got to speak to some of the DICE guys there, including Patrick Bark, and I was asking him then about kind of the release of the game and sort of what was going on there. And basically, as people might remember with Battlefield 4, when that was coming out, the new consoles were just coming out. That's when you were having like the Xbox One and PS4. Was it PS3 even? No. PS4.
They did go on the Battlefield 4 went on last gen as well.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I couldn't remember because it was such
crazy.
It was such a long time ago. Yeah, it's just so many years ago. I couldn't remember. I was like, when did those things come out? But yeah, I remember what was happening. It was around the time of what it was. It was around the time of the release of the Xbox One. And what was happening was, do you remember there was that whole thing when the Xbox One was coming out, and then there was suddenly like loads of speculation about those system specs between the two systems.
Yeah, and the
remember?
Performance of them. Yes.
And there was all sorts of things coming out and arguing back and forth, and they were almost trying to psych each other out as like who's going to have the better system. Well, the problem with that is that when I actually spoke to Patrick Bark down there at the time, what they were saying was that almost from a week-to-week basis, they were trying to get information about what, because they need to know what the specs are.
Yeah, they need to know how to optimize for their consoles.
And just what they can get out of it. And they were having an incredibly difficult time at that moment in terms of actually getting the information from Sony and Microsoft, and it was making their life very hard in terms of actually producing the game. Now, this time, we don't have that because they know the system spec. They'll have worked through it all the way through Battlefield 4 in terms of improving that game, and so now you get to the time where this product, and it's greatly improved. And of course, with the greatly improved visuals that you have in the game, they also will have obviously worked on Battlefront, and so they'll have all of that knowledge there to kind of bring forward. So that's why I think when you're looking at Battlefield 1, it does feel well optimized, it does feel smooth. I haven't really had any moments where I've felt kind of frustrated or slowed down or any of these kind of things. It's felt really sort of sharp and twitchy and good all the way through, just how you kind of want it to feel. So from a performance perspective, I can't at this time really put anything negative against it. It feels how I feel it should feel, so positive from that point. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and I think especially with the graphical enhancement, I mean, there is definitely a huge jump from the Battlefield 4 era of graphics compared to the Star Wars Battlefront and now Battlefield 1 graphics. Like, there was a huge jump in terms of texture quality, and lighting, I think, is the number one thing. Like, lighting is extremely realistic in this one. It was pretty in Battlefield 4, but I always try to say, is the game pretty or is it realistic? Because a lot of games, for example, like something like Crysis, they look pretty, they have lots of effects and such, but do they run well if you put it on ultra settings, and does it really look realistic? I think that Battlefield 1 really pushed the realistic aspect of graphics. The lighting, the shadows, and the textures overall, the shaders are just pristine. And that might be because of the fact that it's not on the last-gen consoles anymore. If you think this is the one Battlefield game, I think Hardline was on Xbox 360 and PS3, but I don't think Battlefield 1 was. And so this is the one game that they didn't have to say, hey, we have to cut back a little bit so we can, hold it on the old-gen consoles. And now they have the next-gen consoles to be the minimum spec now, and they have a lot more freedom, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think that leads us on to talking about the visuals of the game and how it looks. And it does look amazing. I mean, we're talking, Battlefront visuals, especially that map. Can you remember the name of the map? I'm very bad with names. So it's the map...
Argonne Forest?
Yeah, the forest, Argonne Forest, that's it. And that, of course, like everybody's talking about that because, again, similarly to Battlefront, you just have a hell of a lot more actual physical detail. Yeah, foliage, small bushes, small plants, like everywhere you go, the mud, the detail, the shadows between canyons and the treetops coming over and all of those elements in there. It just makes it an absolutely amazing map. And again, the performance is outstanding considering the high level of detail and different situations and just kind of sets that are around that map. But look, on an overall point of view, we can just say it looks fantastic and it's great
and it runs well.
Yeah. But I think it's important to throw in critical aspects as always when I do these things. And something that me and Drew talked about when we were playing, there are some maps where the complexity of the visuals seems actually counterproductive to the gameplay, and also some of the lighting seems counterproductive to the gameplay. And this is an interesting point, which is that how far do you go with realism before it becomes counterproductive? And I actually feel like some of the situations and some of the maps in Battlefield 1 are counterproductive to gameplay, because coming in and out of buildings where the light changes, that's realistic, but in a gameplay point of view, it's frustrating, because when you're coming from outside to inside, you're basically coming in blind, because you're the way
it's pitch black inside.
Yeah, it's pitch black inside, or it's just a darker room inside. The big mansion chateau is a good example. Like, you come into kind of some of those rooms there, and you're coming in from not an especially bright outside area to inside, and basically the way the game is designed is it sort of makes your eyes adjust. So it's a very realistic visual feel, but it's frustrating because you come in and you have to wait for the light to adjust before you can see the room inside. And of course, if you're trying to quickly get eyes on people, they will see you first because they're inside, and so they don't have to have that adjustment of light in the eyes to sort of fixate on you, and they'll just drop you every single time. It's incredibly irritating. And then also there was another map which you will tell me what it is, I'm sure, Drew. It's the castle map, because you were saying already you didn't like that one.
Tau Fortress.
Yeah, and that's basically this outside castle map, but it's a very kind of weird one because it's sort of like a hazy evening. Yeah, it's a hazy evening sunset, and it's a very odd time of the evening. It's like that kind of moment where the sun hasn't gone down, but it's just about to, and all the light is kind of, there's no contrast, so it's kind of like everything feels
just kind of orangey red, and it's hard to really see anything at a distance because the lighting is just that's the moment where I felt like that map, like you couldn't get any good looking screenshots on that map. It just felt odd. It felt really, I don't know, limiting to what you could see at a distance because everything was dark, but it was an odd dark. It wasn't a realistic dark.
Yeah,
it wasn't like a
It's
it
flat.
wasn't like the
it's
castle.
Flat.
Yeah, it was very flat. It's like the castle didn't cast a shadow, or the big mountains that would, block the sunlight didn't cast a, vivid shadow all over the landscape. It was just flat everywhere.
And it's problematic because, it's, like you say, it's difficult to ID targets when you're moving around. And again, that comes back. It's not the same, but it's the same effect, which is that, like when you're moving inside those buildings, what happens is you get picked off by people. Not because you wouldn't ordinarily see them, but simply because the lighting doesn't enable you to get eyes on that target quickly enough, and they just, they'll take you down. Also, just on an off chance, though, that map also fails for me just because I don't like the layout of that map. The castle doesn't really work for me. There's another castle as well on a different map, which is much better, but this one I just don't like the layout of that. We're not going to go into tons of detail about maps and stuff today because it takes too long, and I'll talk about it specifically on other videos. But so there's some pros and cons to some of the maps, but it's not just about those lighting changes. Also, I have found that, again, when you have this much higher fidelity of graphics, when you have this much more detailed, realistic renderings of real-life things like sort of architecture, inside buildings, floors like the checkered marble floors, big chandeliers, all sorts of... There's a crap ton of detail in some of these maps. Now, it performs well. There's no issue with the performance. But again, it's almost like there's so much detail there that it's kind of like... It's like staring at a static screen almost, where there's like black and white dots all over the screen. Your eyes can't pick up on stuff very quickly. And again, did you find that on some of those more complicated maps? Because we did talk about that on the Chateau, where it was sometimes quite hard to pick out targets in the more visually complex areas just because of how much is going on there.
Yeah, I found that sometimes, like, let's say, just for an example, in the for like Argonne Forest map, you ran right past a guy, and I'll get some footage for you so you can show that in the video. But like, you ran right past a guy, and I wouldn't have seen him either, but he moved for a quarter second, and I was like, oh, there he is. But I kind of feel like that can happen in real life. Like, I play a lot of airsoft, and it's like rocking through a forest, even if it's bright as day, it is still extremely hard to see someone if they're standing perfectly still. And maybe, like, I do see, like, let's say in Counter-Strike, there is definitely, in the competitive scene of Counter-Strike, they don't want a map that's too cluttered because it just adds too many objects to think about, and you want to be able to memorize the map and such. And I do see that. But also,
it's like hiding in plain sight. It's like hiding in plain sight.
You can definitely find out where it does kind of weaken the game and its gunplay a lot whenever there's too many objects around. Whenever someone can just lay down and they're invisible within an entire objective. Like, I remember Battlefield 4. If I was doing something, I was busy, I would go to an objective. I would lay down in a bush within the cap zone, and I'd be able to cap it just because that bush was there. Yeah. Like, because nobody would ever find you in that bush. Even thermals couldn't really pierce the bush, so you could just sit in the bush and you were perfectly fine. And I feel like that's what would happen even off of objectives. People would be laying down, sitting in some boxes or something, and be able to snipe. But again, that can happen in real life. Like, real life locations are probably even more cluttered than a standard Battlefield map, and that might just happen.
I think for me, the question is, does it break the game, or does it have an excessively negative impact on the game? The answer is no. It's just that in some areas, it can sometimes feel the combination of light and the complexity of detail can be a little frustrating. But again, you see, what I found was that I would just kind of ID that those areas are more dangerous for you to enter and move through, and so I would try to just avoid those areas and deal with other areas on the map. Again, though, for me, that's a little frustrating because I kind of want to be able to use all the areas of the map. And it just tends to be that, I mean, and it goes both ways. You know, I found that when I was inside those areas, I'd be racking like 3, 4, 5 guys in a row because they'd run in and be like, oh, they can't see quick enough to see, you know, they can't identify you amongst all of the stuff that they're seeing quick enough, and you can just take them down. It's almost like I wasn't even like taking really heavy cover. I was literally just kind of crouching, but I should have been pretty easily visible, but it was like they couldn't see me. It was like they would run in, and these were games we were playing where it was quite intense. You know, there's quite, you know, people were the players were not idiots. They were doing fine, but they'd come into these complex areas, and you'd just be like bang, down, down, down. Like they were just not reacting quick enough to get on you. And I think that highlights to me almost like an issue there. But as I say, it doesn't have an overreaching, overly negative impact on the game itself. Yeah. But I think it's an interesting point to note that when we get to this level of games now where graphics are so advanced and you can fit that amount of detail into an area and still have excellent performance, it's interesting how you do start to see issues that maybe people hadn't considered, where it's like, look, there is actually probably an upper limit. There is perhaps a cap where you go, we don't need any more detail here. Because here's the other thing, it might be beautiful and it might make fantastic, you know, screenshots which are all HD and beautiful and lovely, and you're like, wow, that looks amazing, and it's like, it does, but when you're literally running through there and it takes you like 2 seconds and what you want to do is scan the room and move, you don't need that level of detail. You just don't need it. And I think there is that kind of balancing point where maybe it can go too far. Do you feel like that's a thing? I mean, you were sort of saying about it being realistic, but again, we've got to remember games aren't realistic, and it's more about kind of, you know, how tangible is that gameplay, how fun is that gameplay, and making it work. If they made all of the maps so complicated that you couldn't see each other, that would be super frustrating, you know.
Yeah, that's very true.
So let's talk about vehicles a little bit, I guess, because that's obviously the next thing to go to, and then I guess we'll talk about guns, and then that's probably good enough, I think, for first impression. The vehicles, you know, I heard loads of people saying about the light tanks are ruined now, and they're totally unusable. Not in my experience. We were kicking ass with them, you know.
Just during this discussion, just so I can kind of refresh my mind, I'm actually watching gameplay of me, and I was able to get a 23-0 kill streak with a tank, and I just died on the screen. But light tanks, people... Like, they definitely got a nerf. There's definitely a nerf to their overall health, because I remember just being absolutely... Like, if I was trying in the beta whatsoever, I could get, you know, a 50-0 kill streak, and I was just like, what? This is absolutely broken. They're still powerful. They're still more powerful, in my opinion, than they should be. Like, tanks in real life, they're really powerful, but you shouldn't allow a player anything that enables them to get 20+ kills without dying, even if they're super skilled. I mean, you've got to make the game have a I guess a level of difficulty in a vehicle to have it be where you can get a 20-0 kill streak in the vehicle, but I just feel like it's still more powerful than it should be. But overall, I think the vehicles are pretty well balanced. Other than that, I feel like planes go down a little bit too quick, in my opinion, but they always have since Battlefield 3.
I think they have to go down fast, because otherwise you just get in this situation where they can become detractive and just problematic, and so I think it's better to have them have a small impact and then cycle out than just... And again, we're probably going to reach a point in a month or two where, you know, these expert pilots just rule the skies and nobody can touch them, and it's like, that's going to come back, that's going to be a thing. But regarding the light tank, I actually am kind of still surprised a little bit. I mean, you say that they've been, you know, nerfed a little bit, and to the point where they're not as powerful as they were before. It's definitely true, but then again, you and me were going on some pretty hefty streaks with them, and we had one point, don't forget, we had one point where literally it felt like, and this is no exaggeration, it literally felt like the entire enemy team had just decided that we needed to go down, and they were coming at us. They were coming at us on foot, they were throwing grenades at us, they were firing rockets at us, and we could just see across this field and this swarm of people running at us like,
They were so mad at us because we'd killed over like 40 of them already. I definitely didn't mean like...
And they still didn't take us down. They had to really hard, you know, it was hard to take us out. They really struggled, you know? If I'd have backed away a little bit quicker, if you and me had gone, actually, let's retreat a bit, but we were being a bit ballsy and still felt like we could get in the mix. But we got a bit unlucky and they took us out. But again, we could have backed off, come a different way, and we'd have been fine. We'd have been pushing 30, 40 kills, no problem.
Yeah, I definitely think that the light tanks still need a nerf, for sure. Like, they're still powerful enough that they do need a nerf. And like, I don't think they did enough in terms of the nerf. Maybe I don't know if they're trying to push that tanks are a lot more of a, you know, a vehicle in the battlefield that needs to stay there for a long time, because in Battlefield 4, I feel like half the time I got in a tank, I would die within the first 2 minutes. There would be somebody with an RPG, somebody with, you know, an attack jet that would hit me with a big stinger missile, not stinger missile, the javelin, but things like that.
It's a very difficult thing to balance because the thing is like you say, in Battlefield 4, often when you would get in, but again, you got to remember Battlefield 4, engineers, RPG, C4, all that stuff's very readily available.
Yes.
It kind of is as readily available in this, but the damage models are slightly different, and so it doesn't work quite the same. But the thing is that these things are so hard to balance, because when you have a tank, it's like, as its nature is that it's going to do a lot of damage, but then how do you balance that? Do you make it that it's just instantly destructible by just banging a few rockets into it? Well, then it's just going to get destroyed so quickly every time, and the whole kind of purpose of a tank being a scary thing on the battlefield doesn't work. I mean, that's the whole point, is that they should be imposing, and you should think, when you see a tank and you're in infantry, you should think, shit, it's a tank, you know, and run away perhaps. You shouldn't just be like, hey man, there's a tank, let's just take that out, bang, it's gone. You know, that's not what you want. But it's a very difficult balance. What I feel they need to change, and I said this in the beta, is they need to just change the way repairing works a little, in my opinion. So the way I feel that it should work is, when you are inside the tank, still have the ability to repair from inside the tank, but make it slower than it is now. Okay, slow that down by like 30%. So that if you're inside, it's like, you know, it slows down quite a lot. Takes longer to repair. If you jump out of the tank, you can rep it faster, speed that you can rep right now, and that is a nice balance. It doesn't impact the weapons and stuff are okay, they're fine, that's no problem. The speed of it is fine, that's okay, but just the repairing thing, because that's what it's about. When you get people start focusing on you, if you can just back away and rep quite quickly. I seem to remember us having an engagement where I got dropped to like 30%, maybe something like that, and I know you jumped out and gave me a little help, but only for like a second to just rep it a bit. But between you repping from the outside and me on the inside, I was up like that, you know, and it was just like, that was really fast, you know. So that's the thing that I think they need to change. Don't change the guns, don't change the speed, don't change the armor, don't change the damage power of the rockets or anything like this. Just change the speed of the repping on the tank, and that will balance it out. When it comes to the land ships, I feel like the land ships are powerful as they should be, and again, with some focus fire, they go down, no problem at all. Same as with, like, you know, just the heavy tanks in general. They should be more terrifying, and I found that they were generally okay. And then you've just got the kind of lightweight drive around vehicles. They're just whatever, they're just fine. They're just cars with machine guns, no problem there. Same with the horses and stuff. It's all kind of, it's fine, it's just fine. One thing that we did talk about though when it came to vehicles was lack of transport vehicles, right? And I felt that was the case in the beta, because we were playing that big desert map, but it extends to other maps as well. I still feel frustrated sometimes. I'm just like, oh god damn it, I want to get over there, but I don't want to have to run
from Gulf all the way over to the main objectives in Sinai Desert. You're just like, really? Like, why couldn't there just be, you know, a quad bike? Yet there's not quad bikes in World War I, but like, why couldn't there be a lightweight like bicycle or something that I could take over to the other objectives?
Well, you know, I'll just what if they had horses, but when you jump on the horse, you don't get extra, you know,
you don't get a sword or something. Yeah, exactly.
That'd be a
good idea as well. Yeah.
But there were other maps as well, right, where we were playing. There's a variety of maps where there is quite a lot of open areas. The motorbike and sidecar that you can get on the St. Quentin Scar, and that is a challenge to drive, seriously, because when the battlefield has been destroyed a bit with sort of huge craters and you're trying to drive this motorbike around, honestly, you're like bouncing off the walls. Like, trying to keep that thing on an even keel is like near impossible. It's just all over the place. But that's quite good for transporting around fast. So again, when it comes to vehicles, I'd say that's one negative, is that it still can be a bit frustrating trying to cover these distances and so on. Do you want to talk a little bit about weapons? How do you feel about the weapons and stuff with the game? I mean, the gunplay for me was one of the strongest things in the beta, and I feel like that's still true. But what's your sort of feels about it?
I feel like the weapons, in terms of like the weapons per classes, are pretty well placed. I feel like support weapons aren't exactly that powerful. I saw some people using them, but not as much as, like, let's say the medic or the scout. Especially when I used the scout weapons, I felt like it was definitely buffed since Battlefield 4, especially with the sweet spot. I was getting a lot more one-shot kills than I ever had gotten in Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3. And so that kind of, I guess it lowers the skill requirement to be a good sniper. which was pretty interesting. I feel like the assault weapons are also pretty well placed. It makes it where you can't just play as a one-man army. I guess in Battlefield 4, I used to always play medic because you had an assault rifle, you had an M416 with a Cobra sight, you had one of the best guns in the game, and you had a medipack, or medikit. So you could drop that medikit on the ground at an objective and just sit on it, and you were pretty much a one-man army. Now I feel like they definitely changed that where, that close quarters, flag taker type of guy isn't exactly perfectly a medic anymore. Like, it can't just be a medic, because a medic is still going to be okay in terms of effectiveness at closer ranges, but he's not going to be as powerful as a guy with a fully automatic submachine gun, which I think is pretty well balanced. I think that takes away the power of the medic class that we definitely had in Battlefield 3, and we had even more in Battlefield 4, and I feel like it's pretty well balanced now, the weapons.
Yeah, it is a really interesting choice in the way that they've designed the classes, and I actually think it's one of the strongest things, and I think it also lends itself very much to why that gunplay is really enjoyable, because you have this balance. You don't have, like you say, one guy who's just running around like ruining people, and to a degree, perhaps that's why those tanks feel so devastating now, because you don't have like one guy infantry who's just wrecking everybody all over the place, and so the tanks are more noticeable, perhaps. You're noticing the fact that people are getting these higher kill streaks and that they're not going down, because you similarly don't have that happening with the infantry so much. You basically are more limited per class in terms of what that role does, and it's more specific. The assault class, it's kind of SMGs really the way to go, and you have some shotguns thrown in the mix there as well. But basically, if you're trying to engage mid-range, the spread of the weapon can be enough that it's quite difficult to take people down, and trying to burst fire is really the way to go. So that can be very interesting, just that change in dynamic. With the medic as well, having the sort of semi-auto rifles and stuff with the medic, and being able to snipe fairly effectively with those as well. Especially the higher damage ones. I mean, when we were up on one of the castle maps, and I was sniping at a good range, maybe about 600 meters, 700 meters, and I was getting carefully placed 2-shot kills on people with the higher damage medic rifles. Just kind of get one shot, bang, hit marker, and then he'd be running as well, like, and you're tracking the target, bang, get another one shot. So you're getting 2-shot kills with those high damage medic rifles, which is quite surprising, So it's having that, and then the sniper as well. The sniper works very well. I still feel like on some maps it can be a bit over the top. I mean, do you find that's continued from the beta where the sniping can be a little over the top? That was something people complain about a lot, and it's sort of I don't find it's been as prolific, but I think it is still there for sure in some areas.
Yeah, there's definitely a good 1/3 of players playing as scout, half like usually. Some maps would make it or deem it just unnecessary because there'd be such close quarters battles, but other than that, like, I feel like the ability to have iron sights on the gun and the ability to have like iron sights without any depth of field or anything makes it a lot more powerful, in my opinion. I don't know if that was the same in Battlefield 4. I feel like it might have been, but at least with like the I don't know who it was, Lawrence of Arabia's SMLE, like, I was playing pretty close quarters. I was playing against like assaults, I was playing against supports, and I would win the battle usually because I would just be able to get 2 shots off really quick and win against an average assault guy. But I did want to say this as well with the discussion about classes. If you think about it, the game's been out for, a day so far, and if we're talking about the light tanks being overpowered, you got to think about, like, as well, most players are not going to be experienced enough to know all of the abilities that they can use to be able to take out a tank. I feel like the average casual player isn't going to know, oh, this is dynamite. I use this against tanks primarily so I can take them out at closer ranges. Things like that are overlooked, and it might change in the next month, because if you go and look at, like, let's say devs testing the game, the devs are going to know exactly what weapons they need to use to take out a tank. And if they get a few YouTubers in the mix trying to get a good dev test out, then tanks might not be overpowered, because all the experienced gamers of Battlefield are going to know, okay, this is dynamite, this is the same thing as C4, I'm going to go throw this dynamite on a tank and kill it. But then a casual person playing the game might not know that.
Yeah, it's true. And, we talked about that a little bit, and it's something that I've kind of, spoken about before, especially in these early releases. And that's why it's always good to do these kind of impressions videos rather than, like, here's my complete analysis breakdown of Battlefield. Because at this point in the game, you can't always give a fair rationale about sort of how things play out when you're looking at, the early stages. Also, you got to remember, sometimes people just don't care about that stuff in this stage of the game. You often find that people are they're too busy looking at the map, or just getting gunplay, or just focusing on whatever it is they want to do at that moment in time, and they're not at a point where they sort of feel like, okay, right now we're going to really crack that objective, or that specific target, and so on. So it's a fair point, and it's something we've discussed about on the channel before. But I think definitely when it comes to certain classes, again, like the support class, the support class feels the weakest class for me. Yes, you can put down a ton of automatic fire, and yes, I have got caught out by people just laying down the fire, and you for sure end up in situations sometimes where you can lay down plenty of fire and you do really well, but I have definitely been pivoting between just assault and medic most of the time. The scout for me depends very much on the map, because like you were saying, you were doing pretty well up front, but again, you can be very aggressive with it, but at the same time it's always good to have someone kind of just between you and those enemies, so that you don't get kind of done over just by rate of fire. Yeah, exactly. Or just if you get unlucky and you sort of the enemy moves a little, just like jerk, like as you get a shot off and you just don't get that first shot, you're screwed. It's like, unless you've got some good cover, you're really in trouble then. So having someone between you, if you're working as a 2 or 3 man team, or just in your squad in general, having someone with an iron-sighted sniper like moving around as a kind of aggressive recon, it does work very well. But I think it would work best when you have maybe 3 or 4 people and you're all kind of working objectives together, and then you'll definitely be sort of, because then if you think of it, if someone runs in, like with a support class, maybe, having an aggressive support and recon teams together would work very well, because that guy can just lay that suppressing fire, and maybe he takes like 10, 30, maybe takes like, 20, 30% of the damage of that enemy, and then the sniper just one shot and they're down. That could be a nice combination, which works quite well. So it'd be interesting to see how that works. Hey, let's just talk a little bit about grenades very quickly as well, actually, because they have been quite an interesting thing. Gas is prolific. Like people are loving the gas grenade. They are literally spamming that. You need to be very, very quick on the gas mask in this, because people are literally just chain throwing gas. I remember on one map, so we were trying to breach the castle from the underground tunnels, and like there was a corner that I was trying to get around, and I couldn't get through it, because every time I went to go forward, gas grenade, and then I just start to clear, gas grenade, gas grenade, gas grenade. It was just a chain of gas grenades, one after the other, and I was like, oh my god. But that people just throw gas grenades like crazy. They are really useful. They definitely are, because even if you don't kill,
I think it's a very interesting mechanic, because you can use it whenever you're, let's say, attacking. Like I had in one of my videos, I was attacking a cliffside that had tons and like snipers and support guys just raining fire down on our guys, and I threw 2 gas grenades up there. Absolutely broke up that line, because just 2 gas grenades. They could not aim down their sights. Snipers were now useless. The support guys couldn't lay down and bipod and aim down sights. So it was just very ineffective for them to even try to defend that. So I feel like it's an interesting mechanic for sure.
And it creates a good visual block as well. So, I was always a big fan of smoke grenades in Battlefield. I like smoke grenades because they enable you to, like, if you have a lot of snipers, for example, change up to smoke grenades, and then they're useless. They can't see you, so they're just not going to have that problem. Unless, of course, you've got 3D spotting, which that actually did get changed, but there was a while where 3D spotting would go through smoke, which was annoying. But the gas grenade, it kind of doubles as a smoke grenade. So it's kind of like, why have smoke grenades? Because you could just throw gas and then you've got the double effect. I like the fact that it actually physically affects people as well. Like if you start to breathe it in a little bit before you get that gas mask on, it's not just doing like a damage tick, it actually affects your vision a little.
Visually, I do
think kind of a reaction there.
It's kind of odd whenever I run into a gas grenade and it's a friendly gas grenade, or somebody else on my team threw it, and therefore I get that visual effect, and my guy's coughing and he sounds like he's about to die, but he's not taking any health damage. So like there needs to be some sort of method of, okay, wait, this is a friendly gas grenade. Something I mentioned this before, how in Hardline, I never played Hardline, but in Hardline I knew that the like Molotov cocktails were blue if they were friendly, and fire red if they were hostile. Now I'm not saying that extreme. I'm not saying that extreme, but something like, let's say a yellow gas grenade compared to a green gas grenade. Something maybe.
So you think they actually shouldn't affect? You think that they actually shouldn't affect friendly players?
I don't know. I feel like they could. I thought that they did originally, and I thought that was a perfectly fine idea. And it could go that way as well. If it did affect hostile and friendly players, then it would be it would be a little bit. I don't know how to say it.
I know where I am with this. This is something which comes back to the hardcore and just core aspect, and also that's this. I'll just throw in as an aside. It's disappointing that hardcore isn't in by default. That's irritating for me. I was thinking that this would be a very good game to have hardcore in, and disappointed that's not there from the beginning. Don't know why that is. Don't know if it's coming. I haven't bothered to look to see whether that's coming, but I assume it will because it's such a Battlefield staple. If that is not coming, that's disappointing, and it means that they are definitely targeting towards a kind of a softer aspect audience, which ties in with the kind of Battlefront approach. So I hope that's not the case. I hope they put hardcore in, but in hardcore mode, damn, you throw a gas grenade, it should affect both sides. I hated in Hardline that you could like throw flames down and then just walk through them like it's nothing. It was stupid. It didn't make sense, and it like disconnects you from the immersion of the game that you're playing. If there's a gas grenade and you have thrown it, and there's a teammate near you, whatever, it should affect them too. It just makes sense, and there's not a breaking dynamic there. It should be a kind of it's a counterbalance. But while we're talking about making things easier and simpler, and kind of, for starters, there is, of course, the reduced bullet drop, or as like people like to say, the realistic bullet velocity. But also, I'm also going to throw in with that the fact that you can adjust the pull of the weapon. So it's not the sight, so it's centered to the left or the right or the center. And we talked about that as well. The fact that it feels like that's pandering a little bit to people, sort of making it easier, so if they can't handle the way a weapon handles, they can just adjust it slightly. So in terms of kind of softening up for people, like I say, I feel like don't do that. Make it so people have to learn weapons and get used to them. Don't just adjust it so that they can kind of customize it to their needs. That's just too easy. And then it's the same with the bullet drop and the bullet travel time. And again, it was a Battlefield staple. That was how the weapons handled, and it kind of feels like that was a way that the game worked, and it was a gameplay mechanic which had worked for a long time. I don't know why they changed that up. I'm going to say, though, that the bullet velocity thing, it's not a big deal. It doesn't feel like it breaks the game. It doesn't feel like it has an overly negative impact. I'm just taking note of that in the context of it feels like one of those things that just maybe will make things a little easier for people who are not Battlefield regulars, Battlefield veterans, who know how those kind of mechanics worked previously. What do you think about that, and also the sight adjustment?
I feel like the overall, what you were saying, like the softening of the game, making it easier for a new player to understand the game, is definitely a good topic to bring up, because let's say in a game like Fallout, for example, Fallout 4 was such a simplified version of Fallout, and a lot of people didn't like. A lot of people that were hardcore fans of Fallout New Vegas for its extreme survival mode or its hardcore mode or whatever it had were kind of let down, because Fallout 4 was just so much simpler. There was no karma system. There was no all the complicated stuff that you had to learn that you felt accomplished by learning once you finished a game like Fallout New Vegas. Once you got into Fallout 4 and you realized it wasn't there, you're like, where's the depth? And I feel like that's the same thing with Battlefield. In possibly, I mean, I felt like the bullet velocity in Battlefield 4 was a little bit too slow, in my opinion, even though I do like, the ability to learn the speed of a sniper rifle round, and learn, okay, this is how far I need to aim in front of somebody if they're running, horizontal or parallel to me. And therefore I'll be able to hit them. Not parallel, perpendicular, but
it was very satisfying. I remember in Bad Company 2, like, for example, a guy was driving in a rib, and I managed to track him and snipe him out of the boat. And it's like, with that Battlefield travel time, so that's what it comes back to, about learning the game and not just being like point shoot. And that's kind of the angle that I'm coming at it from.
Yeah, it makes it where skilled players aren't going to be as skilled. Like I say in Battlefront as well, it's just like, it's so casual, it's so simple that the skilled players aren't going to have that ability to even get more skilled in the game, because it's so simple. A new person can learn it so quickly and can easily, as long as they, have a good aim and such, can easily do just as well as a really skilled person in the game that's actually using a lot better tactics.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be something that we just see more in a lot of big games, is that, and there's a very simple reason, which is that after every game, they want the next game to do better. And once you reach that kind of that audience, that community ceiling of players, when you reach that community ceiling of the amount of people playing your game, you have to then open it up to other people. And the only way you can do that is by making changes and softening it, and sort of, basically opening it to new players, and these are the kind of ways that they're going to do that. On the other hand, we actually discussed about this, didn't we? Which was with the sight adjustment in terms of whether it's center or left or right, so that you can adjust for whether the gun pulls to the left or right or whatever. We sort of said like, well, it makes it easier for people. It's sort of giving people a bit of a helping hand. But then I also said, I was like, hang on. I was like, if you're having trouble handling recoil of the gun, whether it pulls left or right or whatever, are you going to have that kind of knowledge to know which way to adjust it, or even that you could adjust it at all?
You can adjust it. Yeah, that's very true.
So I kind of felt like that was a bit of a strange thing. I was just kind of like, meh. I do remember I saw level cap was asking Demise Alan Kurtz on Twitter about it. I saw a tweet from them and they were talking about it, and Alan just replied, well, I find that when it pulls to the right for me, I find that it's easier for me and it's making it easier for me. And I just kind of was like, again, it comes back to that whole sort of making things easier, and I just kind of feel like just learn the way the gun is. It's fine. It's not necessary. It's a fair feature, I suppose, to throw in there. I tell you what I do like. I very much like the way that you can adjust the iron sights in terms of
I do like that as
distance, whether you get things. That's an excellent feature. I really like that very much indeed. I also like the fact that the different weapons have kind of customizable iron sights and you can adjust that. I like that. I've always been a really big fan of iron sights in general, actually. I don't like having big cluttered optics on guns. It feels oppressive and often a bit claustrophobic sometimes as well. So just having clean iron sights and you can just get on your target quick, nothing in the way, keeps your peripheral vision nice, that's good. So I like that very much, and it's good that they have the ability to customize those up. That's good. I guess we have a couple more things to just discuss before we finish. One is going to be the Behemoths and the sort of those benefiting when you're doing badly, which is not something I'm a big fan of, and we can talk about the modes, I think, before we finish up here. But Drew, do you want to talk about the Behemoths a little? Because I think you and me are, again, probably sharing the opinion, but it's a little bit of a contentious thing. I was not too happy about it coming in the first place, you know what I mean? And it's like, I still feel about like that. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the Behemoths are definitely a cinematic and explosive and really cool thing to look at when they explode or get killed. But otherwise, if you get past that, they pretty much are helping the team which is losing, and I feel like that is again softening of the game. That's making the game easier for everyone to play.
Yes.
And if you're playing the game competitively, it can be very, very I don't know the word, destructive of your experience, because if you're trying to really win, if your squad is doing really good, but the rest of your team isn't, and you're losing a round, then your team instantly gets this overpowered behemoth which like has the high explosive machine guns on it that you can fire down upon people with. I feel like that, especially with the blimp, you can just go over an objective and you can fire your high explosive machine guns into that objective and get probably 30 or 20 kills on that just by yourself, and just that by itself, if you have skilled people or just slightly skilled people in that blimp or in that behemoth, you can absolutely change the game. And not really for the better. I feel like the losing team, if they are losing, they should lose, and if they are losing and then they get the blimp, even if they're lesser skilled than the other team, they have this gigantic blimp with high explosive machine guns on it that can absolutely just splash damage the entire objective. And it's like what we were doing at the very end of that one round where I think that was an operations game mode up on the hill with the bunker, where I was just in the blimp and I was just trying to spray down with this big high explosive machine gun. But I was trying to just cover the objective with high explosive rounds, and I was able to kill probably 30 people just doing that.
We didn't do good in that round. We didn't deserve that. That's the point that I had made all along, was that so we were playing this round and it was not going well for us. Now, I mean, me and Drew were trying our hardest to get to points and deal with people and cap objectives, but overall as a team effort it didn't go well. And then suddenly we got this airship and we were just wrecking people, and it's just like, no, we were talking about it in game, and I was saying I don't like I don't like rewarding people that are doing badly. It reinforces bad attitudes. It makes people feel like, hey, it doesn't matter if we do bad because we get the blimp. You could even argue that people might start to deliberately do badly so that they can just get it to come in there. I don't think that's going to be actually,
That one last bunker was such a hard objective. If you just, let's say, lost the last round before you got to that bunker, you could so easily just say, okay, everybody, we just need to not win this, and so that next time we get the blimp, and then when we get the blimp, we can shoot down the objective, and we can get it super easy. And everybody goes, yeah, and then you just absolutely destroy the next round. You might lose one round, but in something like operations, it's like you can lose a round, and you're okay if you lose a round, because the next round you still get pushed up a little bit with a blimp, and you know, so you can definitely use that to your advantage. If you're a skilled 20-man team and you're all communicating, then you can use that blimp. You can almost abuse the fact that you get a blimp by purposely losing a round, and the enemy team won't even know. The enemy team will probably start underestimating you, and then by the last round you can just absolutely destroy them with a blimp.
Very much, and I likened it to back in Call of Duty, where people would actually used to, between rounds, you could rack up your kill streaks and save them, and you wouldn't have to use them in that round, and then as you progress to the next round, people would just drop like chain kill streaks, just one after the other, and the other team couldn't even stand up. They'd just be annihilated, and it was quite bullshit, to be honest. But that's not the case with this. It's not exactly the same as that at all. But what I'm saying is that I don't like rewarding people doing badly. I think that encourages people to not do well. There's the whole issue of people taking people off of the ground, and then sometimes it's a useful thing, sometimes it's not a useful thing. It's a very variable thing. What I feel is that very much like the mega building destruction, the Levolution in Battlefield 4, it feels like someone in a meeting has gone, right, what's going to be the gimmick for this game? What's going to be the thing that we can... Yeah, what's going to be that epic thing in a round that we can have? And then they've bounced ideas around and had a brainstorm about it and a kind of, mood board, and they've come up with this concept. And it's like... I'm going to say again, like some of the other things, it's not game-breaking, all right? It's not game-breaking. It doesn't make it to the point where you think, screw this, I'm never playing this stupid game mode again. It's not that, but it definitely can have a quite significantly negative impact on the game that you are playing in that moment. But it just depends. I mean, so for example, between Operations and Conquest, it's quite different, because in Conquest it doesn't happen obviously on every map. You get a different one, because say for example it's on the desert one, you get the train coming in. Different maps have the train, some have the blimp or the airship, and that kind of dynamic. The train can be a hell of a lot more useless than the actual airship can be, but it very much depends. Like on Operations, because people are more concentrated, because people are pushing through on specific flags to capture, and often there's less of them, I guess is the point. It's more funneled, because it's like Rush, basically, but of course with a conquest element to it, or domination element to it. When the blimp just kind of has to hover around those areas and it can very quickly go between the two, people are just getting obliterated. And, we played a round where there was a team, and we handed them the first section pretty hard, and they got destroyed. And then we went on to the next section, and they annihilated us because they had the blimp. And I said at the time, I was like, this is bullshit. Like, they don't deserve to have that. They did very badly on the first section, and then I remember what happened. They used the airship momentum, because they basically obliterated us with the airship on the second section. And then after that, because they destroyed us so hard, our team was just broken and a shambles all over the place. And they used the momentum of that to basically push through and ruined us on the third section. And then it was only at the very end our team managed to get themselves together, and we just held on to it at the end and we won. But it totally turned the tide of battle, and I'm not okay with that. I think it's crap. It's like you shouldn't get like this gigantic leg up just because you did bad. I don't like that. And it's like team play and coordination and efforts from people are bad enough as it is, without kind of giving them an unwarranted advantage. I think that's crap. And actually, just very quickly before we come on to the modes, the one thing that we do need to talk about very briefly is yet again the players. So the players in Battlefield are very much as you imagine. We talked about this before. You guys know I've talked about this endlessly. It's not going away. It's not going to go away. This is Battlefield now. The way that people play the game, headless chickens all over the place. We played many games. Me and Drew, we had a big gameplay session last night. We played many games of Conquest, many games of Operations, and it was the same. We changed between rounds and played Europe, played US. Same story. Gigantic herds of lemmings going for one base, and there's like 5 or 6 bases which need capping, and they all go to 20 people
And
they
they're
go
blinded.
for one fight.
They're blinded by the fact that they want to just go towards the gunshots. They want to go get kills. They want to, they do want to assist their team, but they just don't really understand that. Okay, I need to sit back and look at this place and say, what ways are probably open that I can head towards an objective that nobody's at. And I made a video just the other day talking about, like, are we playing Conquest wrong? Because I remember in the beta where you mentioned that there was such a group of lemmings that were heading towards Charlie in Sinai Desert. And I was like, that's so true. And I actually sat back and I counted how many times objectives were taken. And I saw that Charlie was taken 13 times, Delta was taken 11, the other two were taken 7 and 8, I think 4 and 4, but then, or I think it was 3 and 4, I'm not really sure, but then the far away objective, I think that's Golf on Sinai Desert, was taken 2 times. It was only taken 2 times, and that shows that objective, which is 1/7 of the entire game's score, was sitting there, probably on one team's side, for 80% of the game, and nobody even thought about it. Nobody cared to even take it over because they just were overshadowed or they were just enveloped in the firefights.
Yeah, and this is something that I said for a long time. Again, people that watch my channel will know this because I've talked about it endlessly all the way through Battlefield 4. There's a very simple fact in Battlefield now, which is that people don't think. That is it. People do not engage their brain and they don't think about, where do we need to go? What could we do? What advantage would it be to maybe not go for the nearest flag? Maybe we should flank around and go to A, go to E, go to G, go to the satellite bases. Sometimes there's a great tactic where, like, for example, I did this several times last night. Drew did it as well, actually, on one flag as well, when we were playing. Probably a few times, actually, sorry. Not just that one time. One time. You just did it one time. I did it loads of times. You did it one time. No. But anyway, the point is that there is something to be said when an enemy team are putting a hell of a lot of pressure onto you on some flags, and you're having your team's having a hard time defending. It can be very worthwhile sending 1 or 2 people to just very, very quickly run to a faraway flag on the enemy team. You start capping that flag, and the enemy team, if they've got even a little bit of awareness about them, will go, holy crap, they're capping behind us. They don't know how many people are there, so they will send other people back to do that. Takes the pressure off the front line. Maybe your guys survive, maybe they don't, but it's worth an effort anyway. And then just in general, capping these satellite flags, prioritizing where you need to go, looking where the enemy are, thinking about it. Just, it's not rocket science, but people just don't do it in any shape or form. And I tell you what, I come back to what I talked about at the end of Battlefield 4 when I stopped playing, which is that I heard loads of talk about how the team players improved in Battlefield 1. I do not see it. There might have been adjustments to the scores, and that's all very well and good, but where are the voice prompts? Okay, where are the things on the heads up, like saying, like, where instead of having some person going, we are, capping A, blah, blah, blah. Where is the guy shouting, men, we're losing G, get over there now? There needs to be something which physically wakes people up and goes,
yeah.
You've got to snap people out of their killing tunnel vision and get them to actually look and go to other places. So that is an issue with the game, and it's not going away. I mean, basically, you've got to like it or lump it, right? You've either got to just suck it up and play it and just go, this is what it is, or you get a private server and you get a load of people to play, you get some friends together and you play a private server and you do it like that, and you get strong, solid gameplay. That's the only way you can do it, because I think in terms of community, it's unfixable now. I don't think that EA and DICE are in a position where they are going to make the drastic changes needed to actually help dictate and sort of not force people, but assist and sort of, just direct people towards things that they could do. It's just not going to happen. I'll continue to make videos as I always have, trying to highlight to people the ways you can improve tactics and kind of capping flags, but it's not that difficult. And there's only so many times you can say just look at where they are and go somewhere else. It's like there's different micro tactics you can use, but to a point it's fairly straightforward. Okay, should we just very briefly go over the modes here? So I guess I'll touch on this and Drew can just give his thoughts. Conquest is Conquest. It's fine. Rush, I actually really like Rush on this one. I felt like it played well. Had a few games with it. I think it's too early in the game to really get a proper feel for Rush, because I feel like, again, like as we talked about earlier, I think people are not switched on enough and they may be worrying about other things at the moment. And the games of Rush I played, although actually very similarly to Battlefield 4, it was either a walk in the park or like a nightmare. So actually maybe it's not that different from previous Rush. Domination I enjoyed. I always enjoyed Domination. I very, very, very much hope they bring back Chainlink. I said this in Battlefield 4. I want Chainlink back. It's bloody amazing. And in Operations, people know what Operations is now. It's basically like a mix of Rush and Conquest, and you kind of can retake from each other or Domination, and you can kind of push through different sectors. You get multiple attempts to kind of take those sectors. It's a really good game mode. Everybody's talking about it. I like it. I'll probably talk about it in more detail in another video. But Drew, your thoughts on that, and maybe if you want any little thoughts just about players and stuff in general.
I really enjoy the game mode for sure, and I kind of like, although you were kind of saying, oh, these cinematics, let's skip them. I kind of enjoyed this cinematic feel. I like the idea that they're trying to almost just, even if it's not really necessary, that they added a little bit more into a game mode like Operations. Operations I felt like was just a super action-packed mix of Rush and Conquest, and I liked it a lot. Do you think I noticed that you noted that the flags could be taken back once they were taken? Like, let's say compared to Rush, you could disarm the MCOM, but you couldn't, once the MCOM was destroyed, you couldn't repair it or anything. So what did you feel about the Conquest, or not Conquest, the Operation objectives being able to be taken back?
Well, where I am with that, and I actually really like it, because what it reminds me of actually is Conquest Assault. And I haven't heard really anybody mention that actually, because maybe people don't remember. So, but with Conquest Assault, it's it was a very much more difficult game mode, because you're essentially trying to. With Conquest Assault, you're trying to take flags off of the enemy. The enemy control all the flags to begin with. So it's not like Conquest in the traditional sense, because in the traditional sense of Conquest, you rush from your bases to cap flags, and you immediately start with a mix-up, right? But with this, with Operations, as I say, it's more like sequential Conquest Assault, because you have to attack those positions and cap them first. Now, that was also the case with Conquest Assault. And as I say, people that played Battlefield 4 wouldn't remember Conquest Assault because it wasn't in. Was it in Battlefield 4? Am I remembering that wrong?
I just remember it from Battlefield 2. That's all I remember it from.
Yeah, I don't think Conquest Assault was in Battlefield 4, but it was such a while ago. I don't think. I'm just going to search on Google. Nope.
Was it in 3?
First Google topic, what happened to Conquest Assault? So yeah, clearly not. So Conquest Assault was in 3, yes it was. And Conquest Assault is where basically you start out from your starting base, and then you have to assault pre-capped enemy positions, okay? So the enemy will control it would be a whole conquest map, right? But you have to start out from your base, and they already control it. So basically, as you rush out from your bases and so on, you have to immediately be on the defensive. But here's the thing. One team doesn't really have a base. You start off at that first point, just as you do in Operations, right? So the nearest point to the enemy is where you start, just like in Operations. And then basically, it's the goal of the attacking team to cap all of those flags. And then once you cap all of those flags, the enemy can't respawn. And then it's just a case of withering them down until they're all dead, and then you win the game. It's a fantastic game mode. It's also a very challenging game mode. It's a game mode which will be way too difficult to ever bring back to Battlefield, because the players are just not aware enough to make it work. I remember even in Battlefield 3, people complaining about it a lot. Like, it's too hard because we get killed at the spawn, and just throw smoke, you donuts. Like, just throw smoke and run, and then once you get past that front line, all you got to do is run all the way back round, and then you create a spawn point for your team, and then you can really get into it, But no, I remember people complaining about that a lot. But so yeah, in terms of capping, it feels like Conquest Assault to me, which I like actually, and I hadn't actually maybe even until now really thought about it in detail, but actually I really like it for that fact, and I haven't heard anybody else make that comparison. I'm sure they have, but I haven't heard anybody say it. And so in Conquest Assault, as the defenders, you felt very much under pressure constantly to recap those bases, and it adds an interesting dynamic, because you're very aware of the fact that if it's not a case of like Rush where it's gone and you think, oh bollocks, because it's gone, and this is the thing that happens in Rush. Once that MCOM's gone, everybody focuses on that other flag, you know. Whereas with this, because you might have 2 or 3 points, even if one gets taken, you can see like, hey, there's about 50% of my team on that other flag. We're going to try and go and get that other one back again. So it creates a very interesting dynamic, just like Conquest Assault, where you're trying to hold on and you're trying to retake, and it's basically a war of attrition. Instead of operations, they actually could have called it attrition, and I think that would have been very good, because that's what it is. It's a battle of attrition to get those flags and you know, burn the tickets down. So yeah, I like it very, very much indeed. But I think there's a hell of a lot more to operations than meets the eye, and I think it's something that I will have to spend a lot more time playing, break it down further, look at the dynamics, look at the way people play it, and really, I think it's something that will have a lot of legs and really be able to get your teeth stuck into. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just...
Or, I thought you were going to continue. Yeah, I definitely think that it's a pretty... I don't know how to say it, like a diverse game mode that can have a lot of different things happen in it, because it's a totally new type of game mode, but it's a mixture of that, you know, we already know how Rush feels and we already know how Conquest feels, but again, like Conquest, there's a lot of different tactics that you can use in Conquest competitively, and I think that Operations could become possibly a more competitive typed game mode as well. I don't know really if the DICE devs are really trying to pull ESL like they did with last time, where they tried to make it where, like, let's say they had a big live stream event where they had the USA versus, you know, Europe or something, and it was extremely competitive, and they try to make it look like a Counter-Strike like champion match or something, but it was just Battlefield. I don't know if they're trying to pull that, but Operations, I feel like, would be a pretty good game mode to try that out on.
I haven't heard them say anything about that, actually. It's kind of interesting. Because they were very vocal about it, the release of Battlefield 4, and I haven't heard anything about that. So maybe they've given up. Maybe they just think, look, let's just make a real good game. Let's make our money and then move on to the next one. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think to a point, though, that what that comes back to is what we were talking about earlier, and I think this is, again, it's a topic for a whole other video where we could discuss completely the ins and outs and a hell of a lot more detail. But very simply, it does come back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of that balance between, you know, visual detail and that kind of performance versus the simplification. You know, if you had a competitive game and people were dying because they came into a room and couldn't ID targets fast enough, that's not going to work. You know, so it's like I think that's what it comes back to, and those limitations. Was there any other game modes other than Operations that you particularly stood out for you? Or it's very much of a kind of
not exactly. I haven't really played it enough yet to look at the others.
Exactly. Yeah, this is still just a first thoughts, but I think the other game modes, they're there. They're the normal game modes. They play as they would basically expect. So guys, I think that's our breakdown of Battlefield 1 so far. I think we've kind of got into a fair amount of detail for a first little thought, a first little analysis. As I always say, it's really a case of waiting for about 2-3 weeks before you can give a proper review. I guarantee that people will already be putting out their reviews for it this week, but essentially, if you want to get a completely holistic view of how the game is going to function and how the player base is going to function and what people are actually focusing on and what weapons are favoured, and, you know, are tanks more powerful, our plane's going to become a nuisance. You can't know that stuff. You can't know that stuff until people burn through some of the unlocks, until people really get a feel of knowing the maps inside out, knowing the strong points, the pushes, the choke points, all of the details in the game. You can't know any of this stuff until those elements come through. So it's going to take a few weeks for people to really get their head around it and see where we are. But I think from an initial standpoint, I would say thumbs up. It's a decent game. It performs well. I enjoy it. And we will see where we go from
Battlefield 4.
Yeah, very much. I think, much better. They haven't had the stability issues. The balance issues are a hell of a lot better. That's the thing, you know, the classes, the weapons. The gunplay is fantastic. I very much enjoy the gunplay. You can just take that as a standalone thing. The gunplay is very, very enjoyable. As I say, I just very much hope that we do get some more infantry-based game modes come back, like Chainlink. I personally feel like that would be a very critical thing. I'm actually going to send some emails and beg them to bring that back, because I really want to see Chainlink, because Domination doesn't cut it for me anymore. Domination was a favourite of mine until they had Chainlink, and then I was like, all Chainlink. The gunplay is so strong in Battlefield 1, it would be a discredit to the game to not have Chainlink back in. So I know that not everybody loved Chainlink, but I freaking loved it. And I tell you, whenever I used to play it on our server, and we had it on my server, we just have solid full games all night. The hardest gameplay, super fun. So I want to see that one come back. Any other final thoughts for you, Drew?
Not exactly. I think that pretty much covers it.
All right, guys, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for watching and listening. As always, we're going to have loads more Battlefield 1 content coming to the channel. I think I'm also going to revise some series which I used to have back with Battlefield 3, Bad Company, and even Battlefield 4. I'm going to be going back through my Battlefield content, which all of you know is extensive, and see which series I might want to return. If you have any thoughts about which series you'd like to return, please drop that down in the comments. And also, of course, go and check out Drew's channel. Okay, we both share a relative love of similar games, so go check out Drew's channel. He has a ton of great content, and hopefully we'll be doing some more videos in the future as well. Thanks for joining us today, Drew.
Yep, no problem.